Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're glad you chose to take a little bit of time with us this evening. I'm Alyssa DeFilippo with Parents Helping Parents, and I manage a program called Connections California, which is a statewide online resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult services. So, if you're interested in estate planning for parents of loved ones with mental illness, you are at the right place. Our presenters this evening are from Special Needs Planning Group in Santa Clara. They are no stranger to the Connections California screen. Ken Prodger is a financial advisor who specializes in helping families plan for the future, including special needs trusts, life care planning, letters of intent, and how to obtain and preserve governmental benefits. Ken understands that parents of children with special needs often feel overwhelmed with therapy, IEPs, and countless other issues, leaving little time or energy to address financial concerns. And yes, Ken has a son with special needs and is the past board chair of Parents Helping Parents. So we thank Ken for your service. Scott Gill is a seasoned financial advisor with a passion for building long lasting relationships with his clients. He specializes in providing financial planning services for families with special needs, helping them to achieve their financial goals. And as a member of the Financial Services Institute, Scott brings a wealth of information and knowledge and experience to his clients. So without further ado, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Scott and Ken, for being here. And thank you to Beatrice, our interpreter of the evening.
Righty. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for the warm welcome. Ken, let me share the screen here and get us all set up and ready to roll. Bear with me 1 second here. Gonna share our screen, and we're gonna go. Ken, how does that look on your end?
Yeah, good. Good.
Okay.
We're good. So again, so I'm Ken and Scott, and so we're a special needs planning group, and we're a fee-based financial planning firm that's in Santa Clara. A large percentage, over 80% of our clients are families with special needs children, and so we handle all sorts of different special needs and disabilities. And this one is near and dear to my heart, and one of the more difficult ones to plan for. So Alyssa said that I have a child with special needs. Yeah, with mental illness problems, and issues. So it's something that is one of the more difficult things to plan for. So when we do a lot of financial planning, we plan basically for two futures. We talk about the parts of what they're doing and how they're trying to be successful financially, because that actually transfer to special needs trust or some other type of instrument to be able to support the child. With a lot of disabilities, we know what the future looks like, meaning that when somebody has a disability, whether it's severe autism or muscular dystrophy or CP, any of those different things, we kind of know what that schedule looks like. Somebody who has a mental illness, we don't know what the future looks like. So whether it's schizophrenia, whether it's bipolar, some of these different things, there can be good times, and those can be extended periods of time that maybe the person will be employed and be able to be self-sufficient, and then something happen and the wheels fall off, and now they're in some sort of crisis. And some of those crises are a little bit different. So yes, we have medical crisis. We also have criminal justice crises where somebody with an issue gets in trouble with the law. How does that affect government benefits and all of those different things? So, so we want to start with just saying that this is the most difficult of the financial planning that we encounter, is when the family is dealing with someone with a mental illness. So Scott, okay, you control it. So we're going to just take an overview of estate planning. The purpose of estate planning is really, again, to plan for two futures. We want the financial success of the parents to be able to be transferred to their adult child, especially if there's a special needs situation, and what we do that. Some of the big things is we just of the uncertainty of what those support levels may be. So for all families, when we work with special needs, the big question is, where is my child going to live? Where are they going to live? Will they be financially independent? Will they be employable? Will they get married? All of those different things that we have to address. And, when depending upon the age of the child that we're doing the planning, some of them we may have an idea, some of them we don't. I mean, we just started working with a family that the children are 38 and 41 still living at home, and have some significant emotional health issues. And we're trying to get the parents of saying, okay, we have the plan. So that's one of the things that we talk about, that transition fund. There will be a transition no matter what, meaning that they will eventually move out of that house or live somewhat independently no matter what happens. And many times parents will just say, well, they'll just live with me till the day I die. That's not really a plan, because we would like to have a trial run of what works, meaning that if your child is able to live independently, let's give it a shot. Let's see how it works. Maybe services coming in can fully support that with independent living skills. Maybe not. It's best to know while you're still young enough as parents to be able to make changes to that plan. And we want to know what those goals are, of what the goals for the individual. Will they be able to, let's say, whether it's live in the family home, live in a condo, rent? What are those different goals that we're trying to accomplish? So some of the key challenges that we have is, okay, how are we going to balance the financial support and what we call needs-based government benefits? So with someone with mental health issues, they may have a work history. So how does that come into play of SSI versus SSDI? And remember, the younger you are, the less credits you need to receive SSDI. So, we always think of, okay, you have to work 10 years to be able to get SSDI. Not if you're 25. The government's not going to require you to work 10 years, because they don't expect that you started working at 15. So there's a graduated scale of how they work. And when they go to SSDI, how does that change the government benefits? So while they may be receiving SSI when they're 18, and that's going to be giving them some sort of supplemental income, if they do qualify for disability, then how does that going to change? And basically, remember, if they go on SSDI, the healthcare provider for SSDI is Medicare, and the healthcare provider for SSI is Medi-Cal. So I'm going to take a deviate a little bit, because we've been hearing a lot of things from families. Well, what's happening with this? What do they call it? The one big beautiful bill. How is that going to impact things? We're not sure. We're starting to see, though, that one of the big things, especially with mental health individuals, is if your child is receiving SSI and Medi-Cal, how are they being qualified for the Medi-Cal? Sometimes, in California, we were called an expansion state, meaning that if you didn't work and you didn't have an income, you automatically qualified for Medi-Cal, regardless of your immigration status and stuff. We gave out free health care. And we had unlimited asset limits. So it used to be $2,000. California, it went to unlimited assets. So for some families, they didn't have to do a lot of planning to get Medi-Cal. Those times have changed. From the state viewpoint, Gavin Newsom signed legislation or whatever that took that unlimited Medi-Cal asset limit and brought it down to 130,000. So now we do have an asset limit to be able to create Medi-Cal. Also, now immigration status is going to have an impact on Medi-Cal. And then the other thing too is sometimes parents, they go, okay, we'll just get the Medi-Cal and we'll just base it on their lack of income. And that's an easy thing to do. There is no big qualification to try and do. And they don't go after the disability qualification. Well, the one big beautiful bill, quote unquote, eliminates that qualification just based on income. So what they are targeting is expansion states, which is California, and when I'm talking about expansion states, it means that the Medi-Cal was greatly expanded in certain states, and California is one of those. So based on the expansion of Medi-Cal, the federal government is now saying if you are able-bodied between 18 and 65, you're not going to get on Medi-Cal just because you don't have income. You have to be disabled. So you want to make sure that your child, if they're receiving Medi-Cal, has a disability classification for the Medi-Cal. If they do not, then you have requirements, meaning that you have to have 80 hours of quote unquote work to be able to qualify for Medi-Cal. Now, that is an expanded definition of work. So 80 hours is any combination of going to school, volunteer work, or employment. But the days are pretty much gone of just saying, well, gee, I just don't want to work, so I still get healthcare coverage. We have a lot of people in the mental health issue that they're living at home, not working, and they're getting Medi-Cal. That may be a problem for some families. Okay, so back to the different things. Certainly with the individual, we want to respect the autonomy and safety. So that's something that we want to take a look at. We talked about the fluctuations that we may have good times and we may have bad times. What are those triggering points? If we know what those are, and we'll talk about that in letter of intent, some of those things to be able to document those things. But there certainly are fluctuations of what services the person may need. And then balancing the financial needs, the emotional needs. When we talk with parents, especially that have family members with mental health issues, they are exhausted, okay? Because it can really be a roller coaster ride, and I've certainly, the parents that are on this call certainly know that, and I've certainly been through it myself. It's just exhausting. One of the big key issues that we take a look with some of the challenges, does your adult child recognize that they have mental health issues? So, we oftentimes have people where they're taking medications, things feel good, and then they say, gee, I don't need the medications anymore. And then they drop the medications, and then problems arise. So the big thing is, are they self-aware that okay, I do have some issues and I do need to take my medications and I do need to stay online of what's happening. So we won't, that's one of the first questions when we work with a family that has a mental health issue is, does the child understand what situation they're in? Okay, so basically some of the goals of the estate planning is that the adult child will have some sort of financial stability. The SSI payments of, if we have the rental agreement or whatever of $1,200 a month, that's not going anywhere too far in California. So we want to make sure that there's some sort of supplemental needs trust or whatever to be able to support them. Generally we look at for families to have that financial support while they're living, having out-of-pocket expense, and then really funding the special needs trust when they're gone. When the parents pass away, that's the big event to fund the special needs trust, and that there's a trustee or a fiduciary to be able to continue that financial support with the funds that are in the trust. We certainly want to make sure that we maximize the public benefits that are available for the individual. But we want to make sure that the plans are adaptive, meaning that that there may be ebbs and flows in terms of support. We even have some things where sometimes the trust will have some things that if that support is no longer needed at that level, that maybe some of the trust funds can be dispersed to another beneficiary. And so a good example, let's say when the mental health situation is, maybe the person goes into some sort of group home or something that are meeting the needs, and the trust was set up that the trust was going to pay for their independent living. And maybe they're not living independently anymore. So the financial drain of the trust may be significantly less than what was planned for, So maybe if there's another child in the family or whatever, you don't want to tie up all those funds. So maybe that can be dispersed to the re remaining beneficiary just in the terms of being fair. But we want to make sure that the trust takes care of the, the individual and that there's some sort of mechanism to make sure that there's a continuing plan of the caregiving so that somebody check as a care manager to make sure that okay, this process and this system is working, and we want to make sure that somebody checks in on that all the time to make sure that that continues to be a successful transition and a successful program for that individual, especially with mental health issues. What may work now may not work several years from now. I remember just a little personal thing with with our child is different medications where they say, hey, all of a sudden we go, we see the behavior, it's starting to get out of whack and stuff, and we say, we're on the medications, and then the psychiatrist says, well, sometimes the medications work for a period of time and then they stop working. It's time we got to change the medications, and it really was hit and miss of what medication and what cocktails of medications work. It is not an exact science. I often say that, that the psychiatrists, they practice medicine. So they're literally trying to figure out what works for that individual and for how long, and then when does it not work, and how do we have to change? Okay, Scott, you want to take over from here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ken. And so, I just want to dovetail kind of off of what you were sharing, because, you know, you're very good when we're having our conversations and we're meeting a client for the first time, or perhaps we're taking them through our planning process. And oftentimes the question comes up, well, what can I do today? Like, what can I do now? And one of those big keys that, doesn't require necessarily the use of another professional, right? Maybe that letter of intent. And what can I do now to document everything I know about my loved one or loved ones, right? If there are multiple children in the family that have mental health issues, what makes a good day a good day? What makes a bad day a bad day? What makes a bad day a good day? Who are some of the other people that are part of your inner circle that are familiar with your loved one, but also that are familiar perhaps with the routine, right? We talk a lot about who that next generation of decision makers are going to be. And we're going to touch on it in just a few slides here too. Well, what about the other people that may not be decision makers, but that can have a pivotal role in terms of being a system or a network of support to help our son or daughter or both during these transition periods, right? And so on this slide here, okay, what are some of the things and some of the tools, some of the strategies that we see in practice to accomplish the financial goals? Well, what we found is there's 4 big keys. One of them, which we touched on earlier, was the special needs trust. At the end of the day, the special needs trust is really designed to do 2 things. It's designed to preserve and protect those valuable or invaluable government benefits, which could be SSI, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, but it's also designed to provide control, right? And what I mean by control is we can set up guardrails, okay? Right? Health, education, maintenance, support. You may have heard of that acronym called HEMS. But when we are designing the special needs trust as a parent for our loved one, we get to have flexibility in terms of what those guardrails might be. And we can also have a discussion and put it in writing as to what makes the guardrails a little more flexible, and at what time might we may need to make them a little bit tighter to ensure that our loved one stays on the best track possible, right? One of the other pieces that absolutely does come up, though, when it comes to the idea of a control and leveraging one of these tools, though, too, is about protection, okay? And it could be protection from predators, from creditors as well, right? Loved ones that are that are battling with mental health illnesses could go, again, through ebbs and flows of times where perhaps they're a little bit more vulnerable, right? And as a result, what can we do? What can we do as parents when we are leaving a legacy to them to ensure that those financial resources are made available for them and could be protected if life throws a curveball at them? Okay, so we're not going to go into much detail about the difference of the first party versus the third party special needs trust, but these are integral pieces of the puzzle. And I think it stresses the importance of having good family communication as well. Because although the majority of these trusts are funded at the passing of mom and dad, the parents, it's not uncommon. And Ken, we can speak to this from other client cases. We've seen grandma and grandpa leave resources, right, to their grandchildren. Best intentions, though, sometimes can cause a bit of a catastrophe if it results in a loss of government benefits because of qualification issues. Okay, but that leads us into the ABLE account, right? So many of you may or may not be familiar with ABLE, but the Cal ABLE program is a wonderful tool that could be a complementary piece, not a replacement to the Special Needs Trust. And why is that? It's because we can contribute in 2025 $19,000 per year. The money that is in the account is not a countable resource, right, to disqualify against government benefits. There are some ceilings that we need to be aware of if you have a certain amount of money in there, but the money can be invested, right? The money can be in cash to use for expenditures and is very flexible in terms of what those expenditures can be. And the money can grow tax deferred as well. So there are a lot of things to like about this. One of the caveats to that, though, is when a definition of disability was given to the individual using the account. Now, some rules are going to be changing in terms of what that age of eligibility would be, but that would be something that we would need to keep in mind in terms of, could this be a resource to position money in for flexibility for those quality of life expenses before or even while money is also in a special needs trust? Okay, so taking it a step further, when we start talking about flexibility in legal documents, but also in decision making, I think at the end of the day, there are several paths that people can wind up taking, right? Right, whether it's going to be more restrictive, least restrictive, or somewhere in between, right? We see a combination of styles that are implemented, right? Anywhere from limited to sometimes full conservatorships, right? Especially when a loved one is going through a transition period of being a minor to an adult at that age 18, right? We've seen folks wanting to go down the path of more of the supported decision making, where there could be a group of individuals there to help act as ongoing mentors to help guide our loved one as it pertains to transitions that are taking place through life, right? And then we've seen it in between, to Ken, to the point you were making, where perhaps there are other legal documents that have been established that allow for flexibility depending upon where we're at in life and, right, what additional supports and help that we may need. I think one of the big things that comes down to the decision-making framework, though, has to be about having conversations with our loved ones too, and getting an idea about what they envision for themselves also, right? I think it can be easy sometimes to assume that this may be what our loved one wants or doesn't want. And sometimes it can be very refreshing and even surprising to hear perhaps what they want for themselves as well. And so that's the importance, I know, Ken, for you and I, when we hold those family meetings and we really understand, okay, where is it that you see yourself 5 years, 10 years potentially down the road, for those that are more open to having that discussion. Okay. And so when we start looking at support networks and we start looking at professional guidance, right, I think this can come in many shapes and sizes, right? So as Ken mentioned before, so we are financial planners, right? We run a financial services firm. So we're not attorneys, we're not tax advisors, we're not personal counselors, but we find ourselves crossing paths with many of these folks. So what we wanted to do today was just talk from a high level. What are some of those key team players that might already be involved or perhaps might become more involved with your team moving forward, right? one of the biggest roles and responsibilities that we have in terms of the financial planning support is understanding and educating families how they can leverage and manage their own assets, their own cash flow, so that way money can not only be successfully used for the parent's lifetime, but securing that legacy for the next generation. Okay, that's why we do call it our process the family legacy continuum, because we do believe we're planning for 2 generations. The success of the parents leads oftentimes to the success of the child in terms of giving those financial resources a place and a plan to support our loved one moving forward. But with that being said, we can't successfully do our job well without the help of other professionals and their expertise. And one of the big ones tends to be the estate planning firms. Okay, the estate planners that specialize within the special needs community, because they're the ones that draft the legal documents. They can help set up those guardrails that I was mentioning earlier. They can help define key roles that people will play for those next generation of decision makers. Okay, having the trust itself is great. Having the trust that's ultimately funded with assets allows there to be resources, and then understanding how each one of those pieces of the puzzle can adapt over time as needs evolve is where you start finding the sweet spot. But with that being said, sometimes we may need additional support from other experts that have intimate knowledge about perhaps the medical background of our loved one, and can help us identify perhaps other resources that would be there to help support and care for one. So when we look at benefit coordination, right, we look at experts that could specialize in eligibility for SSI. We look at experts that can help in terms of identifying for local housing, or even housing across the United States. So Ken, one firm that comes to mind, National Care Advisors, right? We do a lot of work with them here in the Bay Area, but as you know, they have a national presence, and they support families that have loved ones with various types of backgrounds and various types of disabilities and special needs. But we can rely upon their expertise to provide a deeper medical understanding and evaluation of what the costs of care might look like, what that might look like. And I think what that ultimately leads to is a better understanding of the financial impact of building the plan, but also setting the best expectation with our legal team as to who do we want or maybe need as that next generation decision maker to oversee some of this as a trustee, perhaps to complement what could be a sibling, brother, sister, extended family member, or even a professional fiduciary for those that may not have a lot of family that's local. Okay. But the last piece.
Let me interrupt for a second. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls of just saying, well, gee, well, he's got my son with the mental health issues has a brother who's fine, who's doing very successful and stuff. Can't we just let him control everything and do everything? How's that work?
Yeah. Well, so it's common that we see it, right? And what we find, though, is that oftentimes the sibling, one, is either unaware of the responsibilities that they're being asked to take on, okay? The legal responsibilities, right? The professional responsibilities of overseeing their money. But what we also observe is that sometimes the siblings don't have the best relationship together. And it's not uncommon to see some siblings actually move out of state or across country as they're looking to grow their own life. And so when we come across families that are suggesting or implying that perhaps brother or sister is going to be the trustee of that special needs trust, it not only leads us to a discussion about, are they aware of this? Do they know what their roles and responsibilities might be? But more importantly, it's, tell us about the relationship that they have together. What's that like today? And what do you observe about how they interact too? Because that trustee, Ken, and you're great at doing this too, they have to be able to say no. The answer is not always yes. And sometimes what we find is being that trustee takes the sibling out of the role of just being the brother or the sister, and it changes the family dynamic where there could be additional friction. Okay. And so part of our discussion goes back to roles and responsibilities. Might there be a different or more suited role for a sibling to take instead of being that sole trustee that is going to be the day-to-day administrator, the individual filing the tax return, coordinating with the investment advisor and the bookkeeping, integrating with the attorney, so on and so forth. It is a full-time job. But Ken, I welcome your thoughts in there too, because I know we come across that very, very frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I just telling a story or whatever where we the mom was very the mom was in her 70s. The child with schizophrenia was in both boys were in their 40s. You know, the the son with the disability or whatever was still living at home. And so she thought, well, okay, well, gee, the brother can oversee that. And so we actually ran a scenario of saying, okay, well, let's just pretend you're no longer there and we'll set up an account and we'll put some money in it. And then with the brother with the mental health issue can then contact his brother to if he needs different supports and things like that. Let's do a trial run of this quote special needs trust and see what happens. Well, it didn't take too long that the brother with the mental health issues had a tantrum or whatever, had some things, and broke his iPad. Okay, and it was a brand new iPad that the mother had just got him actually for Christmas, and so he called up and he to his brother. First of all, he went to his mother saying, "Okay, gee, mom, can you buy me a new iPad?" She goes, "No, son, you're remember, I'm not around. You have to call your brother to get him to buy a new pad." And the brother, upon receiving the phone call, told him, he goes, "You just got one. You just got to be more careful with it. And no, I'm not going to buy you a new iPad." Which set off a whole conflict. We after going through that a couple times, the mom decided, maybe it's not the best idea to have the brother be the trustee of the special needs trust. And this, so we actually did a little trial run to see what happens. But Scott, we've had several that just recently where the other child has literally moved to the opposite coast to go to college and to do some of these things. And basically, when we've had a family meeting, and they said, "Yeah, we do not really want to be responsible for our brother or sister or whatever. We have our own lives to live." And it's really put some strains sometimes on the family, but it's important to know. Okay, we say, the child with the special needs, it's the child of the parents. It's not the child of the sibling. Okay, and the siblings need to have their own freedom and autonomy and their own life as well.
Yeah. And so I think that was a good segue, right? As we go back, we're talking about autonomy a lot too. And what does that actually mean? And so, I want to go back and just focus on that flexibility of the estate plan. So Ken, you talked about this, right? We heard it at the conference on Saturday, right? How do you build in flexible language to an estate plan? So that way, if we need to have a least restrictive environment, we can do so. But more importantly, how can we also make it, especially if there are multiple children in a family that are part of a legacy plan, that perhaps overfunded trusts could be used to redistribute to support those other family members too, right? There are ways of doing this. And I think the big key that we look at when it comes to transitioning, right? Transitioning from one generation to another, right, is there are ways of supporting multiple people, right? It doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition, right? We can build in leeway, but I think it starts with understanding, one, that that's a choice, and then 2, getting a better idea of, what are truly the priorities for that next step, right? What do we want covered at a bare minimum? And then from there, we can start to figure out what would it take to be able to create a buffer should it be needed, okay? But some of this, I think, goes back to that family meeting that we wind up having in coordination with professionals. Like, what do we think that your son or daughter says, right? Do they have an opinion, right? And I think sometimes we had it with our recent client too as well, Ken. What perhaps might the counselor say or the psychiatrist say, right? It was just 2 weeks ago where the parents met with the daughter's counselor to understand where the counselor felt their daughter was, because the parents themselves, they felt that their child would never be able to leave the home, would never be able to leave with anyone else. And I think part of what they had found out when they were speaking with their counselor too is that, well, maybe that's not entirely the case. Perhaps there were more options than the parents were giving them credit for. Now, each circumstance is going to be different. But again, having those professionals in different fields to receive and provide that feedback, I think can be very, very helpful to have. And so when we go through and look at some of the supportive decision-making options that people have, again, it is a combination of different fields, I think, working together as a unit. And National Care Advisors always says a good thing too, and this may be a little off topic, but as a parent, I feel like every role falls onto your shoulders, right? In terms of being potentially the parent, the friend, right? Someone that's handling the finances, right? Someone that's going to be a primary caregiver. And what is it? Can National Care Advisors say, in order to replace one parent upon their passing, it takes what, 6 people, 7 different people to do? And so when they say it takes a team, it literally takes a team to be able to work with. And so to your point, a transition will happen. What can we do sooner than later to see what resources and tools and people will work best today while we're still here to help to ensure that transition takes place as smoothly as possible? Okay. So when we start looking at implementation, when we start looking at some next steps, like what are some of the things that we can wind up doing? Well, we've talked about this idea of flexibility a lot, but I think I want to come back down to this piece of the puzzle of regular conversations and reviews, but also this idea of co-trustees and trust protectors. Okay. Understanding the difference between the roles. One is to act more as the day-to-day administrator. One is to act as the CEO of the entity itself, okay, in terms of being able to make the big decisions. Perfect example that comes up, okay? Hey, is Chase Bank still the best corporate trustee? Are they doing their job for what we hired them to do? Or do we need to go to Bank of America Merrill Lynch instead? Okay, those are one of the decisions that can come up as a trust protector. Not having to balance the checkbook, not having to pay the PG&E bill, right? Not having to go out and drive our potential son or daughter if they need support getting to and from a certain destination, but helping to make sure that the respective people in their field that are executing on a specific job are doing their job well. Okay. But Ken, I'd love to hear your thoughts too on the trust protector, because I know it's a big one that comes up for us all the time.
Yeah, it's we generally like to see that if there's a sibling is going to be involved in the planning and in that they take the role of trust protectors. Again, they're going to be the CEO of and make the big decisions and let somebody else do the day-to-day, worker bee of the trust.
Exactly. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these additional steps to get started. Then we can wrap it up, open it up to some question and answer, because I see that there are several coming through on the chat right now as well. So one of the things that Ken touched on earlier, assessing resources and benefits. What does that mean? what am I eligible for today? What might I be eligible for in the future? Okay, one of those big ones that comes up, especially at that transition age 17 to 18, SSI. What are one of those big ones that come up when parents retire and start taking income? Potentially that transition of SSI to SSDI, where if we're on SSDI, that opens up an avenue to collect Medicare and Medi-Cal, something that they call dual eligibility. Okay, but that hinges upon what type of definition of disability do I have, if any at all. Okay, goals and priorities, right? What are we trying to accomplish? One of the biggest ones that comes up for us all the time is, where will my loved one live? Can they stay in the family home? Do we want them to stay in the family home? Are they able to cohabitate with other people if there was a housemate or if they lived in a group home type setting? Okay, those are things sometimes that we learn more about as our loved one continues to get older and to mature. Okay, sometimes our loved one may have an opinion altogether and they know exactly what they want, and it's about finding the best fit, perhaps to accommodate other areas of their life, whether it be a work schedule, whether it be near social programs that they wind up having, whether it be near other family members that they may be in the community too. This professional team we talked about, which is important, whether it's on the financial side, whether it's on the benefit coordination side, the estate planning side, the tax planning side, there's a bevy of people and resources that can be near and dear to your family to help support as transitions change. Because at the end of the day, rules change, laws change, but also aspirations and ambitions for your family do too. And we want to make sure that whatever you aspire to have for you and your loved ones, that your plan can be accommodative and can adapt as well. Okay. And then lastly, when we start looking at drafting and implementing the plan, and I think this goes back to that idea of transitions happen. Okay. They're going to happen whether we want them or not. And what can we do perhaps to help with a transition while we're still here as a parent to see what works and what doesn't, and then to be able to take that next best step as we gather more information. Okay. And so why do we think that a lot of this is important? The benefits of planning early? Well, we think a big part of it is about peace of mind. Okay. It's about peace of mind and knowing that, like, I have done the best that we can in our ability to help ensure that we have continuity in place with the right people, the right places, and the resources to help provide a quality of care. Okay. We've understood to the best of our abilities what some of the tools could be now and have tried to set them up. But more importantly, in some cases, we've had the courage to start and to try and to be accepting that even if stumbling blocks happen, we're able to find a way to pick ourselves up and to help and keep taking that next step forward as well. Right. And so we're very, very big advocates as planners, and not only helping people to understand the financial side of what it means to have an effective legacy or estate plan, but also to acknowledge how important that emotional side is too. Okay. And so I think from there, we just want to thank each and every one for taking the time to come out. We're certainly going to have time available left in terms of answering some questions that you've put through, but here at Special Needs Planning Group, we really do pride ourselves in trying to provide personalized guidance, planning support for you, and collaboration with other professionals that we know have an expertise in their field in supporting the special needs community. Right? It's about empowering you to make the best decision that you can for your loved ones, and we're here to help. And so many folks aren't aware, but by participating with PHP, we offer those that want to have a more discreet conversation in private a complimentary consultation here in our office across the street from Levi Stadium or via Zoom. But please know that we're here to help. And if we're not the best fit to help you out, we have other resources, and perhaps we know of someone else that could be a good fit for you too. But I think with that said, Ken, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we open it up?
No, I think we got a number of questions. Some of them we've answered, so hopefully the people that wrote the question realized we answered. But let's start. You want me to?
Yeah, just before we do,
Oh, okay.
thank you so much for all this information. And we are going to try and get to all the questions. I think we have some time, but I just want to direct everybody's attention to the chat, which is now closed. So the links are going to stay there. There's an English evaluation and a Spanish evaluation. If you should click on them, please, for simple questions. You can do that while you're listening as well. Ken and Scott, if you've been looking at questions, is there anything that calls out to you? Or maybe there are a few of them that talk about, do you work with attorneys? How do we find this whole team that we put together? Is there one entity we can go to, or do we have to go to individual ones on our own? Maybe if you can just kind of talk about that in general terms.
Yeah, so we collaborate with a handful of attorneys that focus on the special needs community that have practices much similar to ours, that a big percentage of their clients are special needs. So we do that. Most of the time we work in parallel. You know, what we don't want to do is necessarily where somebody comes in, a special needs trust is a piece of the puzzle. So sometimes people rush out and get the special needs trust done, and then they hire us, and then we do the different things, and then they have to get their trust amended. So what we would like to do is say, okay, what's your financial situation? How much is going to have to go in the special needs trust? What's it going to be funded with? Once we have those questions answered, then it's much easier to draft an appropriate special needs trust. Is that special needs trust going to be embedded into your revocable living trust? Is it going to be a standalone document? Are there going to be retirement assets that are going to fund the special needs trust? We have a couple questions on that. You know, can you designate the trust as a beneficiary of a 401k or a Roth IRA? Yes, you can. Is it a good decision to do that? It depends. Is the trust drafted specifically to accept those funds? Are there other siblings involved? What are the best assets to transfer to a special needs trust upon your passing? Scott, you want to take a couple of the other? Oh, once somebody asks you, can you be on Medicare and Medi-Cal at the same time? Yes, that's called dual eligibility. Scott mentioned that. And so that's something to be aware of. Again, with the new changes of the big, beautiful bill, you know, you don't want to lose that Medi-Cal because that pays all your co-pays and some of those things that you would have with if you just were on Medicare.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
just want to make sure that we get the Spanish question because I've translated it. Does the
Oh, good.
trustee?
Okay, I saw that, but I didn't,
Yeah, right.
unfortunately.
Well, none of us do. We have to use our friend Google Translate. So does the trustee have to be a lawyer or a service provided by an agency, and how is the trustee paid? I think they're talking about for the special needs trust.
Yeah, the trustee does not, trustee, a lot of times there's a provision for them to be paid, but they do not, they can be a paid professional, or they could be a member of the family or a family friend or somebody like that. So that's an important decision. In this area, we have a lot of families that we work with that they don't have a big family support network here that's in California. So we have to go, okay, that it's going to have to be some sort of a professional organization or individual to be able to manage that role.
Mhm.
Let me see. One of them about an Enable account. Is it tax deferred or tax free? Technically, it's tax deferred as it's in the account growing. And for qualified withdrawals, it's tax free. So the closest thing would be to a Roth, meaning it's tax deferred and tax free. It is a very liberal definition of what a qualified disability expense is. It's pretty much anything you want it to be. So for most people, an Able account is a no-brainer. You do it. You do the
Um,
California Able account, by the way, because that does not have a payback provision. Other states do. So if you're in California, you want to use the California Able account.
and so we know there is a limit in the amount of money you can put into an ABLE account, a Cal ABLE account.
Mhm.
Is there a limit to the amount of money you can put into a trust?
No.
Hmm.
You can put as much as you want. You know, the Able account has the 19,000. You know, it can affect SSI at 100 under federal rules. Under California rules, it would actually be 130 because of that. It would impact that. So, but a special needs trust can be funded with as much money or as little money as possible.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions, and actually, next semester in April, we are going to be having something about estate planning on a shoestring budget. Ellen Cookman, who's an attorney who's presented for us before, is going to be presenting that. But there are a couple of questions here, like how do we do this if we don't have a lot of money? Do you have any
Yeah,
words of
so this,
wisdom for folks?
so some of the things is, yes, some of the things, yes, this costs money or whatever to do or whatever. Many times we recoup the actual costs of the planning by additional services or additional aid that they get. Peace of mind is worth something on that. But in the trust standpoint, there's pooled trusts. So there's like the Good Shepherd Fund and things like that that basically don't charge you for drafting the trust. They use a master trust that all of their clients use and stuff. So that's a more reasonable thing to do. Do you have the control and some of the flexibility of that? No, it's pretty much, you're with their program and they dictate of some of that stuff. But yeah, that's adequate for a lot of different people, and it's better than nothing,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. And actually, Steve Dale, who's an attorney who has spoken with us before and goes around the whole circuit, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
But in the spring, I think he's going to be presenting on specifically pooled trusts so people can get a better sense of what those are.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
just
the
going to direct,
administrator of some pool trust. I'm trying to
yes,
think
yeah,
which one he
he
is.
is the
Well,
Golden
yes, he
Gate,
is.
Golden Gate. Um,
Okay.
but I just want to direct people's attention again to the chat with those evaluations. We don't have nearly enough in. Please click on that and answer those 4 questions, and we'll return to the other questions. What about just advice if you have the adult who might be not really good with money but isn't conserved? I mean, any ideas about how to deal with something like that?
Yeah. So remember when we talk about special needs trust, we talk about protecting government benefits, but we also talk about that they don't have direct access to the money, so there's a protection there to protect them from being either taken advantage of or that they just have poor spending habits themselves. So that's where our special needs trust really comes into play. I want to answer one question because somebody wrote the ABLE account is a terrible account with very little interest. That's because you haven't invested the funds. So remember,
Yes.
if you just put the money in the thing, then it's going to be like a bank account, which just gets a percent or whatever like that. You need to invest it like it's a retirement account or something like that, so that those monies can grow. It's an investment account. If you're just having it sit in cash, then you're losing a huge advantage of the ABLE account of being able to grow.
And somebody is asking the able account is not inheritable. That was another of the Spanish questions.
Yes, it is. There's a beneficiary.
Okay.
So if the person were to pass away, it would be inherited by the remainder beneficiary of the ABLE account.
Okay. And somebody was also asking about what about the family member who's a conservator? Are they responsible in the event a person decides to sue the trust?
Ugh.
Yeah, I'm not. I'll leave that question up there because I'm not
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that.
Give
I'm
that
not
to an
sure.
Give that to
attorney.
an
Yeah, I
attorney.
was just going to say maybe this isn't a question for us. All right, so we're just going to forget that one. Sorry. Um, let's see. It's 7:27. We have time for a few more. Thank you for helping out with negotiating these questions tonight, my friends. I appreciate it. Um, uh, Folks are asking about the house, and leaving a house. So what if a grandparent wants to leave a house? Do they leave it to the parent first, and then does the parent put it into the special needs trust? And what are the pros and cons of putting a house into a special needs trust? Did you see that question?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll do that. And Scott, somebody asked for our email and phone numbers. Can you put that in the chat as I'm
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going in
Why don't
there
I?
right.
I'll do that.
Okay.
okay. Yeah, so the big thing of leaving a house, that's going to be a significant amount of capital or whatever to do that. The big thing, does the individual that the house is going to be left to, do they have the financial resources, either through their own, working or through a special needs trust, to pay for the maintenance of the house? So there's property taxes. Now there is a step up in basis in terms of the house, and there is a much greater exemption on the property taxes. But Still, it's going to be, you're going to have thousands of dollars that are going to be due every year in terms of property taxes and maintenance and PG&E and all this stuff. Do you have the does the individual have the financial resources either through themselves or through a special needs trust to pay for that trust? Um, and will there be roommates in that house and on? And some of the things we talk about, especially with mental health issues, is that the best place for them to be in terms of isolation? So sometimes we have people that, yeah, they live in a house or whatever, but then they're totally isolated. Do we have supported living services to come in and check on the house? But generally, if grandma wants to leave the house, yeah, that can be left into the special needs trust. But that's again working with us and with an attorney to say, okay, what's the best path? Should it go to the parents first and then go to the special needs trust, or should it go directly to the special needs trust? But so it depends on the actual circumstances.
And I think folks are asking about fees and things. I think probably best to give you a call and take advantage of that complimentary consultation. Thank you very much for offering that. And that way you can talk all about that with them.
Sure.
Let's see, Scott, you're typing an answer.
Yep.
How can a parent stipulate condition in terms and experience? Yeah, well, I think we've touched on this for the adult who is financially inexperienced and has poor impulse control. I think you definitely answered that. Finding a professional fiduciary. Any ideas?
That's a tough one. So the big thing with finding a professional fiduciary is because you're probably not going to need one for a long time. So a lot of times we talk to parents, they're 40, 50 years old or something, and they're saying, gee, okay, in 30 years when I die, who would I hire as the fiduciary to be able to do that? Well, if you came to me saying, gee, would you be my fiduciary? Okay, I'm going to be retired way before, you're going to need me. So, yeah, so it's tough. So generally we do corporate fiduciaries, or again, that's a great role for the trust protector to be at that time to go and find who's an adequate and an acceptable fiduciary at that time. Trying to find one now, they really don't want to talk to people because you will probably never become a client. Because it's going to be decades down the road.
Yeah, as I'm looking around personally for a fiduciary, I'm looking at those who have succession plans in place, or a lot of times you'll find family businesses who have fiduciaries. So you might be talking to the mom or the dad now, but they have their son or daughter who's working with them, who's, maybe 35, 36, 7 years old. So they may be around. So that's how you maybe develop the relationship. But that's a tough one. It really is a tough one. I agree. All right, people are saying thank you. Somebody's saying they don't see contact information. It's in the chat. I'm just going to check one more time how we're doing with these. Yeah, we're doing pretty good on those evaluations. By the clock on the screen, it is 7:32. I don't want to cut Scott short in typing away because I see he's diligently trying to answer as many questions as he can. But I do think it might be time to say thank you to Ken and Scott for giving their time and their wisdom to us. Thank you for the complimentary consultations. I'm sure you're going to be getting some calls. Thank you, Beatrice. We hope we spoke slowly enough. Sorry if we didn't get to all your questions, but again, the complimentary consultation will help. And please join us next Tuesday, actually, when Scott and Ken will be back along with Ellen Cookman to answer the questions, why do I need a special needs planner and a special needs attorney? So maybe if you didn't get your questions answered tonight, you may be able to get them answered on Tuesday. So thanks everybody for coming. Any last words, Scott, Ken?
We're here to help. That's the bottom line. Give us a call, shoot us an email or whatever.
And help they do. I have personal experience with that. So help they do. They're really great in helping us. Okay. Thanks, everybody.